Go ahead, Maria.
Good evening, everyone. I am a graduate student at Wayne State, and tonight we are speaking about domestic violence with male victims. And tonight we're going to hear from Tommy Dudley, right? The second, a 39-year-old two-time male survivor, advocate of domestic violence and parental alienation. His goal is spreading awareness, educating, and healing while helping others heal. Not only has he been speaking up for these two causes, but also for scoliosis awareness, since he is a spinal fusion survivor as well. Bent, bruised, but not broken, he says. Next, we have Dave Beatty, an advocate for domestic violence survivors since 1990. He's the founder of Riders Against Domestic Violence and a voice for those who have lost their voice. And we have Philip James, who lives in Richmond, Virginia. He graduated college from Prairie View A&M University with a bachelor's in architecture and a minor in military science. He served 12 years on active duty in the United States Army as an infantry officer with 2 combat deployments to Iraq and 2 successful company commands. He opened up a nonprofit, Gym for Veterans, 2 years in Pennsylvania, and now back with his brother, helping him develop his construction business. So according to the National Coalition of Domestic Violence, 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact, sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contradiction of sexuality, sexually transmitted diseases, and so forth. Another fact is we've got 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime to the point in which they felt very fearful or believed that they or someone close to them would be harmed or killed. 44.9% of victims of rape in the United States were raped by an acquaintance. 5.1 million men in the United States have been stalked in their lifetime. So there's a stigma associated with violence against men. Masculinity plays a huge factor in the ability to talk about this topic because people are afraid of having their masculinity questioned. Research has shown that women are less likely to face arrest than their male partners. A lot of underreporting happens for this reason. So according to the American Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, so a sample of 16,000 U.S. adults, 26% of homosexual men, 37.3% of bisexual men, and 29% of heterosexual men had been a victim of intimate partner violence. CDC Director Tom Friedman stated, quote, "This report suggests that lesbians, gay men, and bisexuals in this country suffer a heavy toll of sexual violence and stalking committed by an intimate partner. So let's hear from Nicole Beverly. She is the founder of the Enough Initiative.
Hi guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Maria, for the introduction to the topic that we're discussing tonight, which is men and domestic violence. And I'm so honored to have our guests on. It looks like Dave got bumped out, but hopefully he will pop right back on. So Maria, I'm gonna move you from the stream right now so we can get a just a closer view of everybody as we're talking. Okay. All right, guys, hopefully Dave will pop right back on. Great to have you both on as guests tonight. I really firmly believe that this is a topic that is not discussed nearly enough. You know, often whenever someone's talking about domestic violence, they're using the terms her and she, and I'm referring to female victims. So I felt like it was really important that we discuss a topic that's not discussed nearly often enough, which is male victims of domestic violence, and try to help end the stigma related to it. So again, so happy to have you both on. I'm going to ask you guys to take about 10 minutes if you need a little more, or if less time is needed, that's fine, to just share your stories with people who might be watching, from the early beginnings of the relationship that you found yourself in that ended up being abusive, and then, you know, kind of what things happened during that relationship, and also how it ended. So Tommy, would you mind starting and going first with that topic?
Of course. Well, first of all, Nicole, thank you for having me on the show and getting this topic out there. Like you said, it's a stigma that no one wants to talk about, and most men are going to come forward because they feel a certain kind of way being a man. So I've been advocating since 2016. My last abusive relationship was 2015 here in Dallas, Texas. Before that, I was in a abusive marriage from 2006 to 2010 up in Seattle, Tacoma, Washington. So that's where the abuse for me actually started. I was dating a girl up there. I was working at the airport. She's working at the airport. She started to isolate me from my friends and family. I'd never been to Seattle, Tacoma, so I was only around her and her family, which is how she liked it. Then she started questioning who girls were, who people were. She'd come up on to the ticket counter. She started looking at people's names and badges, and you know, she started threatening people, calling people, going through my phone. Her family enabled her, her church enabled her, her pastor enabled her. You know, she just had all these people that had her back. And I didn't even realize that I was being isolated. I just kind of fell out of touch with a lot of people from Dallas and from, you know, college and all that sort of thing. And people I worked with, you know, it just happened one day. And I still don't know, like, how did I lose contact with them? It's because I was being isolated. You know, she did things to get attention. Like she would claim to be the victim, tried to do things like suicidal things. I went to the hospital one night with her because she tried to commit suicide. I remember when she hit me the first time, I couldn't believe it. I kind of was like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to leave? Am I supposed to hit her back? Am I supposed to just walk out? What am I going to do? I'm in Seattle. I don't know anything about this place. First time up here. All my family's in Dallas. All my stuff's here. Now what am I going to do? So, I mean, I pretty much took it. You know, that's all I could do. And my only way of getting out was when my dad got sick. So I ended up going back home and my dad passed away. But, you know, abusers, they know how to use things that they know are close to you to manipulate you. So she was able to kind of still be in that circle, come to my dad's funeral. Then I ended up coming up back to Seattle and, you know, things were still the same. You know, she'd say, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I'm sorry. And I apologize, but still I'd get bit, scratched, punched, all the above. The physical was just terrible. But I mean, I could take a punch, you know, but it's still not right. You know, she blame it on things like, well, you have all these women working around you and you're cheating on me and all this other stuff. And before anyone ever turned my head in Seattle, she was hitting on me way before that. You know, it had nothing to do with that. You can't say you're hitting on me because you feel like I'm cheating on you. You were hitting on me 2 years prior, so what's your excuse now? So, it was like I said, her family doesn't believe, they believe everything she said. I got those kind of comments like, she's a good girl. Take care of her. If you do something wrong to her, we have a problem. I'm thinking when guys and people come to me like that, we already have a problem because you're assuming something and you're thinking something about me, but you're not knowing what's really going on in the household. Your daughter, your niece, your cousin, whatever, she's abusive. She's a manipulator. She's a liar. But you guys are believing her because you're her family and that's what you do. The church people, same thing. I bumped heads with so many people up there because they were on her side and I had no one on my side because I didn't tell anybody. I went to work with the bruises and the scratches, almost lost my job, almost lost everything I had. I called the police twice in those 4 years, once because my tires were flat when I woke up in the morning for work. And then the second time I was just done with it. She was strangling me and trying to do all this other stuff so she wouldn't let me out of the house, so those were the only 2 times I called the police, and she was in jail for 2 days, and that was only because it was Labor Day weekend. That's pretty much how that relationship ended. The divorce was proceeding, and her attorney, he really sucked, so he was dragging out the whole divorce thing. My job at the airline, they pretty much helped me get out of that situation as well. They checked on me, made sure I was able to get my stuff moved out. Made sure I was able to transport my things back from Seattle to Dallas. Fast forwarding from that, my second one was the year 2015. It was mainly that summer of 2015. I was dating a girl that I was working with, and she became very abusive during the summer. She was also very jealous, very controlling. She'd get fired up quick, and I thought it was cute, that she really, was looking at me like that, not recognizing the signs again. Then I started to recognize them. Then things started to happen like, she's putting my things out. When she put it out, she like cut the bag so stuff would fall out. She put me out at like midnight. I was staying in hotels. She attacked me on the freeway when I was driving in Dallas in the middle of the night. She just attacked me, and I'm still like trying to keep her off me while I'm driving, and I had to pull over on the freeway, and she's having an asthma attack, but she's still fighting me. And I'm trying to lower the window to like fan her to get her to stop having an asthma attack and to get her to stop hitting on me because it's hot in there, I did pull up behind the police later on that night in South Dallas because that was the only way I could see to get her to stop hitting me. So I didn't want to get her in any trouble because she had kids and I had gotten close with her kids. When I get close with someone's kids and family, I'm like down for them. I'm there for them. I'm a father figure to them, and they're like children to me. So I didn't want to get her in trouble in that aspect. So I never called the police. She ended up attacking me again that night in the projects. And I had to like throw her to the ground and keep her off me. I had to hold her down. And I was looking around because I knew I could have been attacked by people in the area that were thinking I was jumping on her. So she's yelling at me. She's calling me all kind of B's and H's and everything you can think of to emasculate a man. She's telling them, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to tell them you did it and that you owe back child support and this, that, and the other. And, she's just going. And she told her mom I hit her. So her mom threatened me on Facebook. I ended up running away. I got away because she was trying to hold me, but I ran down the street like 6 blocks away, went into a washateria that happened to be open. And this lady let me use her phone. I went and slept at the dark bus station for a little bit. And then I got picked up by a friend of my sister, stayed with him overnight. And then I left again. I disappeared. So, I mean, it was, those 2 instances for me, both in Seattle and Dallas, was what I dealt with. So that combined about 5-6 years of domestic violence from a female, from an ex-wife, and from a girlfriend.
And Tommy, listening to you talking, I mean, your story, like so many of the things that you lived through and went through are things that, so many female victims have shared. Like the stories are so similar. And I think it's so important for people watching right now to really understand that an abuser is an abuser, regardless of the gender, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of any of those other factors. Someone with an abusive personality has an abusive personality. And so many of the things that you brought up and mentioned, like I could relate to on such a deep level because I lived through the exact same things. I think it's really important. One of the questions I was going to ask you, and then we'll have you answer Nicole's question, was how much time did you take after that first relationship ended before you started dating? Like, did you do any healing, any work? What made you vulnerable to that second abusive relationship, do you think, in hindsight?
I think it was a financial thing. I went from, having everything there in Seattle, having 2 cars, a garage, stuff I never had in Dallas. And then I lost it all. She ruined my credit. She pretty much ruined my life, ruined my thoughts about women, about love, about marriage, about my children, things of that sort. So, no, I really didn't heal. When I got back home, I was just trying to help out my sister and my nephews and raise them and make sure everything was taken care of with them. And this girl kind of saw my financial situation and she let us live with her.
Mm-hmm.
So then it started again.
And I'm sure in the beginning it was, as many abusers start out seeming like the perfect person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Person to date, on the surface, they do a very good job of selling that package.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely makes sense. Nicole did ask, this was when you were talking about your first abusive relationship. Did she blame her past relationships for the way she behaved with you?
I remember she told me one instance before we started dating of a prior boyfriend that went to church with her and they were in a long relationship. And I think that he started dating someone else and he brought her to the church and she slapped him in the church. That was the only thing I remember about that. Also, I remember her, saying in the past she had been abused sexually and raped and things of that sort by other people. So I felt like all that stuff she had been through that she had never told me, that she had never told her family or her church family, that she took that out on me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense. Dave or Phil, do either of you really have a preference about who wants to share next?
It doesn't matter.
I'll let Dave go first. This is my first time
Okay.
sharing, so
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Dave.
In my case, I started dating a lady after my children had gone to live with their mother, and I was raising them before that. And I was basically trying to get a family situation going so I could bring my kids down and they'd see some normalcy. Well, I would take her out and she was so perfect when I first met her. So charming, witty, everything. I just fell in love with her, and as we dated, I started seeing some things. She'd do the same thing. She'd open my phone and look at my contacts and find things in there and ask me about them. And I'd say, well, there's really nothing to it. But she wouldn't, she was very abusive that way. And we'd go out to our friends and she'd belittle me in front of everybody, and all I could do was sit there and take it because, and it just went on and got worse and worse as it came on. And I didn't feel like, okay, well, I'm going to ask her to leave because I don't want to date her anymore. We were living together at the time, and I didn't want to feel like I was a failure to my kids or anybody else. So I kept on it. And I had a situation as well. I was driving down the road and I was being hit and had to pull over almost the same story. She would just hit for no reason. If she didn't like something, she'd hit. Well, it kind of You know, I don't want to start crying or anything because it was really bad there for quite a while. And this went on for like 6 months or so. And to cap the whole thing off, one night we went out and we were having fun and everything. And we got home and she didn't want to be home. So she took a telephone that was sitting on the counter and hit me in the back of the head. And I passed out. And when I woke up from that, I knew where she'd went. She'd went back to the bar, you know, and by then I was mad enough. I got out and I went straight to the bar, and there she was in the bar in the back of the bar, sitting on this guy's lap. Well, I went back there and confronted her, and she goes, "Hey, look here, Dave, I'm with a real man. This is a real man right here." And I said, "Nah, come on. Let's go." And then she started to raise her fists, and I started to guard myself, and then the bouncers got me. They grabbed my hands. And she goes, "Take him out back and let me do what I want to with him." And well, they did. They took me and held me against the dumpster out in the back of this bar. And she just started kicking me. And there was nothing I could do. The guys were just so strong. I could not fight them and get away. So she kicked me over and over and over till I fell out, you know, on the ground. And then she said, "Well, you guys can take over." And they just literally kicked me and kicked me and kicked me till I passed out. And I ended up, to make a long story short, I ended up in the hospital. They had broken every bone in my left side, my leg in 3 places, all my ribs on my left side, my orbital bone right here, my jaw. And to top it off, to make it even worse, they stole all my identity. So when I was at the hospital, I was put in as a John Doe. They didn't know who I was. And I woke up and passed back out and woke up several times during all this was going on. I could hear the doctors talking to each other, saying, "I don't know how this guy is still alive.
Wow.
I really don't know how this guy's still alive." And they, I was in the hospital for 2.5 months. But by the time I was able to tell them who I was, you know, my jaw here healed enough to where I could tell them I had lost my job. I'd lost my car had been repossessed, all of that. They didn't know who I was. You know, I tried to get it all back. I couldn't. By the time I had gotten out of the hospital, the people that had done it to me were long gone, never to be found.
Including the person you were dating at the time?
Including the person I was dating at the time. They had cleaned my bank account out, everything. Taken everything for the apartment, was already being lived in by someone else. You know, I became homeless at that point. When I went to the authorities to try to get help with it, they just, "Well, what do you want us to do? It's been 2 months, you know." So I filed a report. They took the report and everything and they filed it, but I never heard anything from it. And if it wasn't for a friend of mine that took me in, I wouldn't even have gotten another job. It took about 3 months after that, after being homeless for 3 months. It was quite a spectacle. But she would do things when we were dating. She would do things that triggered me, and I thought, well, should I get out of this? But I was afraid to. I'm just so afraid of being a loser. You know, I didn't want to lose. You know, and when I tried to tell my story to other people, "Dave, you let a girl hit you?" I mean, there's some pride in being a male, and I kept it secret for a lot of years because of that people that would respond that way.
Absolutely understandable.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that whole stigma and why it's so important to have these conversations to help end it and allow more people, like the fact that you guys are on tonight is huge. And I hope it will encourage other male victims to speak up too. And, how involved they want to get in advocacy work is one thing, but just even speaking up when they hear other people speaking negatively about domestic violence or, stigmatizing male victims.
Yeah, it's also important to listen to others' stories
Mhm.
because they need that avenue. And this right here is awesome for people to listen to people's stories. And I appreciate you having me on like this.
Absolutely. Again, I'm so honored to have all of you here and sharing your stories. Dave, a couple of questions. Like if you are able to look back, it's always easy, I always say hindsight's 2020, right? What were the earliest red flags in that relationship looking back now that you recognize?
The earliest red flag was when she would talk to her friends about me, and they would go, "Are you really like that?" Like she was trying to paint a picture of me being the bad guy. And that was the earliest red flag to me. And then again, she would look in my phone and ask me questions about who this person is and that person is, and basically accuse me of cheating, and things of that nature, and it just went on from there. And then the belittling began, and looking back, I still don't know why today I didn't just call it off at that point.
And I think that's a question that many of us as victims, ask ourselves. And again, hindsight's always 2020. And when we're in the heat of those relationships and what is important, I think, again, for people to understand is that it's not always just the bad, the bad, the bad. In between each of the bad is that cycle of good, right? And things are apologizing and saying they're going to change and sucking you back in for the next cycle to happen again, which is the escalation and the belittling and name calling and all those other pieces. And it sucks us back in and makes us stay for longer than we would if it was just the negative behavior.
Oh yeah, she could be so charming.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so.
Yeah, so I think, I just want to make sure people understand that watching, because people are always real quick to tell me, oh, I wouldn't have put up with that. I wouldn't have stayed. I wouldn't, they're so quick to tell me that too. And I'm like, but wait, there's another piece to that. It's a part of a whole cycle where they suck you back in, make promises, things are great, and then the behavior starts again and it goes on and on. So I always tell people, and I think, I think both of you kind of said, like, one day you just realized, like, how did this even happen? And that's what happens to so many victims of domestic violence, whether it's emotional, verbal, physical, is they're so good at manipulating us that you realize, like, all of a sudden, like, how did this happen to me? How did I get into this situation? But it is because our abusers were so good at manipulating circumstances, and yours especially, Dave. I mean, the fact that she was able to get these bouncers to buy into her narrative that you are somehow, going to hurt her, and they, held you down, and she allowed that to happen is absolutely, I mean, that's like sickening. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm so sorry that happened.
Thank you.
Ever seen or heard from this person since?
Nope. I actually left the state that I was living in and moved to a new state. This all happened in Arizona.
Okay.
And I moved to Texas to get away from it, to get away from the people that she knew and so on and so forth. I just couldn't live there anymore. It just triggered me too bad.
Yeah. So you needed a fresh start.
Absolutely.
Okay. Phil, are you ready to share your kind of background story?
Yeah, my story's probably nowhere near as intense, but yeah, you guys have some really powerful stories, and I'm just like, wow. But my relationship started off actually like she knew, like her family knew my family, and that's kind of how we like got introduced and through church and stuff. And uh, I really only knew her for about 6 months, and just like it was just like one of those things I fell for really fast and stuff. And once we got married, we came together. I was stationed at Fort Hood at the time, and you know, that's when I first started noticing what Tommy talked about, the isolation. I started feeling thin, where my friends were getting cut off and stuff. Like she would get upset if I talked with my mom. Uh, I had friends call me on the phone like, oh, she like I was in there. I was always under depression. Like if I'm with somebody, I had nothing to hide. So I gave her all my passwords and all my to Facebook. It was MySpace back then as well. My voicemail, my emails, everything. I just like gave it to her because I was like I had nothing to hide. So she could just go through my phone and just call like every single female and just try to like see if if I was messing around or something like that. And so I like a lot of times I didn't know this was going on until like someone would text me back or something and be like, "Hey, your wife called me." And I'm just like, "Oh wow, okay." So it was a lot of that going on. It was I remember like at the church I was going to at the time, I was like deeply involved with a lot of the events that they had going on and stuff. And after she came into the picture, it was like a lot of people that I had like built relationships with over the years. They just kind of like started backing away from me and stuff, and I couldn't figure out why. And then one of my mentors there one day, he pulls me aside one day, and he's like, "Dude, what's going on with you, man?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I'm tired of coming home to my wife and hearing how much of a douchebag you are." I'm like, "Really?" And it was just something I had no idea. It kind of blindsided me, but that was part of that whole like isolation thing, and it was just like that stuff like that kept happening. Like I just remember just I just remember like us getting into arguments like out in public, like I it was like I could never want to go out in public with her because it just felt like something was always going to happen. And it was just like an argument would happen. Like if she would say, "Hey, you're looking at a girl with something," she would always accuse me of cheating, and like I would never cheat. And I'd have friends at the time that said, "Oh, she's probably cheating," but then I would get upset at them because I'm like, "Yo, she would never cheat on me." Like I'm just like I'm trying to take care of my wife. That's my livelihood, my family stuff. And come to find out, long story short, that wasn't the case. Um, it's a lot of times when it did get physical, um, just like you mentioned before, there's that stigma where you're the man. I'm the man. Like I'm in the army. I been to Ranger School. Like I've been on deployments and stuff. Like I should be able to take a hit and stuff like that. So like she's constantly hitting me and stuff and pinching me and so like there were times like I would have to like hold her wrist down and like I mean she would just stay there for like minutes just like trying to attack me and stuff and like I just like I didn't know what to do because I'm just like do I like try and run but then like it's causing the scene outside and stuff or you know either way I'm a catch 22 like I'm in trouble like if like police coming in like they see the marks I'm holding her down and stuff but I'm getting beat so you're just like in this like lose situation. I remember one time like she did catch me uh like she punched me in the face and gave me a black eye. I go to work and my commander asked me like what like what happened to me and I told him like my wife hit me and like everybody just bust out laughing because like I'm at work with a black eye and my little old wife did this to me and stuff like it was like this opposite situation that most people would see in a movie or something. So then I remember one time she actually uh left and went she drove like hours away or something like that and to a it was a pastor of another church that was giving us like marriage counseling and stuff and this is after she gave me the black eye and basically she was trying to say that, I was the one like starting everything. And so they were trying to get me to come up there and pick her up. And I was trying to say like, dude, I'm trying to be done with this whole thing. Like she's finally away. She's finally at the house. Like I'm trying to be done with it. And like through talking to me and coercion, they got me to come up there and pick her up and stuff, and making me think like, hey, this is my fault that I'm in this situation. And as a man, I should be trying my best to like keep this marriage together. And yeah, worst decision I could have made at the time, because like she was already gone at the house and stuff, and like I went up there to get her, and we did some counseling and brought her back, and then like the hell just kept going. And so after that, like I remember I was gearing up for, I found out she was actually, when I found out she was actually cheating on me, I was gearing up for a third deployment to Afghanistan, and I was training at NTC, not NTC, but JRTC down in Fort Polk, Louisiana. And I get a phone call from her brother-in-law, and he's telling me that, she's driving around, she's driving 12 hours from Fort Campbell to Virginia to visit some guy that, lives a couple hours away from him. And they're doing whatever. And it's like, this is like her quote unquote best friend, but they're spending like crazy amounts of time together. And so I'm like, okay, I'm like, that's kind of like, that's a little weird, but okay. I'm still kind of like, not believing a lot of stuff. And then finally, like, one of my friends, her friend's best friend is married to like my friend. And he calls me up one day and says, hey, your wife is sending text messages to my wife that she's sleeping with this dude. And I'm just like, wow. But at that point, I'm so like, ready to get out. And I felt like being like, I was like heavy in the church and stuff. And I felt like because she cheated, this was finally my way out. And so I was like, okay, I'm like, this is the point I can get out. Like most people, I guess, would be like really upset, but I was just like, this is like the time for me to get free and stuff. And so I didn't even like approach her with the conversation because I knew she was gonna lie about it. I just waited for another argument to happen. And when it happened, I was like, she said something to the effect like, this isn't gonna work. And I just took it as, okay, this is my chance to like, bring up the fact that we probably should divorce. And I kind of found out later that she was kind of like trying to use that moment to kind of like manipulate me again to try and like get me to stay, but she had no idea that I knew what she was doing. And basically she drugged the divorce out for months, and I ended up in that financial bind that you guys ended up in. I ended up getting a permit change station to Pennsylvania, and ended up living in my car for 2 months. And because I had a property out in Campbell, and I couldn't give that up at the time, and so I ended up living in my car for 2 months and going to work and sleeping in a storage unit and going to the gym in the morning, showering there, and then just doing that cycle all day, for months until like the divorce finally like finalized and I got some kind of break.
Wow. And that was, so that was it for that relationship. Did she ever, after you left, Phil, did she stalk you or harass you, or was you relocating?
Well, she tried sending text messages and stuff, and I just like, I ignored them. And when I saw her again at the divorce hearing at the court in Tennessee, she made mention of the text messages. And I just said, hey, I can't get your text messages. I'm not getting anything. So I lied about it. And after that, she just like stopped texting me. And then I just, I continue to block her on all social media. Her siblings, I just like keep them, away and just like pretend like they don't exist.
Phil, Nicole's asking, did she ever threaten your military career?
She did threaten to like take my retirement at one point, But that didn't go into fruition. But it like I mean, the things she did affect my career. In the point that I'm homeless, and at the same time I'm holding a position in the military, and trying to pretend like I'm like living this like perfect life, and at the same time I'm basically hustling it. People are, it's the middle of February in central Pennsylvania. People are dying on the streets and, from homelessness. And here I am sleeping in my car, covered in snow, not knowing if I'm going to wake up the next morning.
I want to ask you something since you just mentioned that. Did you even look at the possibility of going into a domestic violence shelter at that point in time? Because I know that's a huge obstacle for a lot of men, is that there aren't shelter beds for male victims of domestic violence. Or did you not even, did you know that and not look?
No, the thought didn't even cross my mind. I didn't think that anything out there was like that for me. Just like what happened to me before. Like I went to work with a black eye, and it was just a big joke. Like how this little lady just give you a black eye and stuff. I mean, everybody's joking about it. So I didn't know things like that existed for men at the time.
Do you think, hearing you say that is pretty profound. And do you think even at that point in time that you even recognized that you were in an abusive relationship?
I knew it was like physically a little bit, but it wasn't until like I like talked to you and you started like sharing with me the different terms, like when it came to gaslighting and like word salad. Like I found that she was using that a lot, and with like in our conversations, like it was just like, I mean, it got to the point we were saying the same thing. It was almost like we were paraphrasing, but then she would just be like, "No, you're saying this," and it just kept it going, just to keep it going, just so she could be right about something. And it was just this constant going on and on and on. And then the other thing that was big was the flying monkey thing, and that was like turning all your friends against you and stuff. And like it wasn't until after the fact you shared those definitions with me. I was just like, wow, like it was like textbook, like everything I went through was like written out.
And hearing Tammy and Dave talking too, I was thinking about those terms because like the whole flying monkey is like using other people to tarnish your reputation. It's such a common strategy used by abusers. And, in all three of your stories, I heard the gaslighting, making you think that turning things around and they didn't really happen or they happened in a different way. And then using their flying monkeys to continue to tarnish you. So absolutely, I heard that across all three of your stories. A few other things I heard, across, I was just kind of taking notes because I'm actually working or finishing my presentation for North Carolina A&T and working on the red flags and warning signs. I mean, you guys, all of you mentioned jealousy, the isolation, the put downs, fear, anger, blaming you, the shame and financial, through all three of your stories, those were common themes, but common themes that are huge red flags. So again, I hope anyone watching is really paying attention. If you're in a dating relationship and you're kind of recognizing these things that these gentlemen have shared with us tonight in your relationship, to really pay close attention. And I'm going to ask you guys for your advice for men before we end. But one other thing that I heard at least two of you talk about was church quite a bit, and the relationship with church and how maybe, what kind of education do we need to be looking at giving churches so that they have a better understanding too of the cycle of domestic violence and that men are impacted too, instead of automatically assuming that you guys are to blame. And Phil, for you, it really took you back into an abusive relationship that you had escaped. So do any of you have like specific thoughts on that topic?
It's hard to like, I mean, because the doctrine through church is always like, the man's the head of the house, and it's almost like the wife is always like submissive and supporting, but there's always like those weird like hidden undertones, like like, oh, she's submissive, but it's equal submission, and you better do what she says, or you're in trouble. It's weird sometimes like that, and I think there needs to be like better education, more stories, like so people can actually like see how this stuff is actually affecting certain people. Because I have another friend that I told you about earlier that wanted to see the podcast, and he was a first sergeant in the Army, my buddy Frank, and his wife actually like would come into the company area sometimes and like just cause havoc, and that like really affected his career. And she was really involved in a lot of stuff that he did, like with my wife, like it was like I would try to keep her at bay because I knew how a lot of stuff it was, but for him, like she was just always in a company and causing like friction between him and affecting his career. And so with the church, like they're always just like backing that. It's like if they had the education or some sort of like tool to actually help them see like how detrimental it is to just like constantly just like automatically assume the man because he's stronger, that he can't be manipulated and berated and belittled and destroyed, then I think things will be better for a lot of men in the future.
Tommy, is there anything you want to add to that with your experiences with the church, or Dave? Great. Tommy, you're muted. Hold on one sec. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of agree with what Phil was saying. I grew up in the church, being down here in the Bible Belt, in Texas. Church was a big focal point for me. I had always been taught that you don't divorce. So that whole time I was in that marriage, I was like, I'm not going to divorce her. Hopefully she'll divorce me. If I screw up enough or mess up enough, she'll get rid of me, but it wasn't happening. I tried to look into other avenues to see what I could do to get out of the marriage. That's not something I really wanted to do because also I had a child with her. So I knew if I left the marriage that I wouldn't get to see my daughter. I knew that for sure. I knew what kind of person she was. I knew that she would keep my child from me. So, I mean, when I was talking about her church previously, she grew up in that church. So, of course, they were giving her the benefit of the doubt. She's the princess. She's the good woman. You better take care of her, this, that, the other. But, they weren't looking in retrospect, what she had been doing prior, what she was really like, and what I was, dealing with. They weren't paying attention to that sort of thing. So I feel like, the churches sometimes they do, they don't really know how to deal with domestic violence that's going on in the church. They don't know how to say, they just want you to work it out, just stay together, just man up, be the head of the house. But, when I'm up in Seattle, I'm hearing terms like happy life, happy wife. What happened to happy spouse, happy house? Why can't we both be happy together and then the household will be as it should be? Why are you trying to emasculate a man and take away him as being the lead, as following God, and then him being in his position to lead the house? But you telling me if I don't make my wife happy, it's going to be hell to pay. Like that verse that says you're going to be sleeping, it's better to sleep on the top of a house than to be in the house with a nagging wife. I got into an argument with her and her sister and her family about that verse on Facebook because they felt like I was attacking her. But I'm saying it's better to be on the rooftop than in the house with a nagging wife, abusive, nagging, manipulative, narcissistic wife. So, I mean, yeah, they need to make sure that they finish those verses that come after the fact of a man doesn't divorce his wife. They need to go a little further into that of when you can divorce someone, because God will forgive you for anything. He'll forgive you for anything if you ask. But, people aren't looking at that. They just putting it all on the man's society, and the church put a lot on the man's shoulder when it comes to marriage and even dealing with
Absolutely. And
this domestic
Miriam just commented, she said she was a horrible victim of child abuse, and the church constantly turned a blind eye. I came to church bleeding through my dress from having a belt used on me all the time. To this day, they still act like she's a saint. It's disgusting. So, I mean, we might, need to look at having a topic specifically for that and maybe inviting some pastors, ministers, clergy, whatever, of different backgrounds to come on and to have this discussion, because I think it is important that we're continuing to spread awareness everywhere. And I do think that's a missed kind of gap area also. Obstacles. I know throughout, you guys sharing your stories, you kind of did already talk about obstacles, but Dave, I'm going to start with you in terms of you being able to leave or after, in terms of obstacles that you feel as a victim in general, and then also as a male victim that you faced or that other men face when it comes to domestic violence.
Well, it's just to me, the stigma of, hey, you've got to be strong, you've got to be a man, you've got to be, the people that make fun of you because you got hit, those stigmas. It's never the woman's fault. It's always the man's fault when the police look at you. When you go to try to explain it to even churches. When you talk to your pastor, you say, she's pretty mean to me. She says, well, Dave, if she ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And that's the story that I got from going to church. And she wasn't much a churchgoer, but the thing is men are raised to be, you can't cry. You just got to take it. Whatever happens in your life, whether she's hitting you, whether she's doing this to you, you don't raise a hand to her. And I never did. But it's okay the other way around, you can't cry. You can't tell your story to anybody. Nobody's going to believe you. Nobody's going to believe that a little girl can do so much damage to you. But it's all true, and we all know it. Just like the others have said, they can really manipulate their friends and everybody to make you look bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, even in different relationships. Even after I got out of that one, I got into another one that was similar, but it didn't last very long because I wouldn't let it go to that point.
Good for you.
And because of that, I'm still single today, matter of fact.
And there's a question that I'm sure, we'll kind of talk about, because I get asked this question all the time about dating after going through experiences like that, and how do you trust people again? So we'll kind of touch on that. And Dave, as you were talking to, I hope that when I'm talking to young people, especially high school and college students, that I'm doing a good job of explaining to the young men, especially how this happened. And one of the things that you mentioned that does play a big part of it is often, from the time they're itty bitty, boys are taught, never hit a girl, never hit your sister, never, even if a girl hits you at school, don't hit her back. And it's condition. And then someone starts dating, they fall in love. Again, the abuser on the surface seems like the perfect person. The hit, and the young man is taught, never hit a woman. They don't hit back. There's the apology cycle, the honeymoon cycle. The abuse happens again, but the young man is conditioned to never hit back. And things just increase and the violence increases. And, before you know it, you're in an abusive relationship, but you still have been taught your entire life never to hit a female back. And so that kind of, I think, gives them, a little bit of an understanding of how easily it can happen. But then also I tell them, even just as importantly, is the one time you block her from hitting you or restrain her and you leave a mark. If the police are called, she could have hit you 100 times before that call was made. But if you call and there's a mark on her from just being restrained, you are going to be the one going to jail. So it's not cute. It's not funny. It's not okay for a female to put their hands on you at any time, regardless of gender. It is not okay to be in a relationship when someone is using violence, intimidation, all those things we talked about to control you. So if you guys have any other suggestions that I should be adding when I'm trying to help people, especially young men, understand how they can potentially become a victim of this, or anything I should be adding, please share with me, because your knowledge is so important to help me as I continue my work.
Yeah, I think were you gonna go, Tommy? Or
oh no, you go right ahead, Phil. You got it.
Oh, I think you were 100% on. There needs to be more focus on no hitting. Period. Like regardless, you're male or female, because I mean, it was a point in time in Texas, and they probably changed it now. But I know when I was like stationed out there, and even in Kentucky, like it didn't matter who got hit. Like as long as the police were called, like the male was always going to jail. Like they would always take the soldier to jail. It didn't matter if she hit him. I had one soldier whose wife punched herself in the chest, and they locked him up. And if it wasn't for the detective looking at the hit and seeing looking at how small her hand is, how small the mark is, and how big his hand was, he would have got prosecuted. But basically like that, looking into that, he got off, and she didn't get him in trouble. Just there needs to be some type of training in society. Hey, it's wrong to just put your hands on people, period, whether you're a man or a woman.
Absolutely. And again, thank God for good detective work, which we often don't see in domestic violence cases. Let's just be real. Let's just be honest. That doesn't happen often. So in your friend's situation, thank goodness that there was a detective who actually listened and paid attention and did the work, because so often we don't see that happen. It's just
right.
Tommy, was there anything that you were going to add in terms of when I'm talking to young men, especially?
Well, I mean, honestly, Ms. Nicole, we're not too much different from our survivor sisters when it comes to abuse. Everything happens the same way. We feel the same way. The only difference is that we are afraid to reach out to the police. We are afraid to talk about it. We are afraid to, get help and get out. When a girl is hitting on a guy, everybody thinks it's cute or it's funny. And even the guys, sometimes I see them laughing about it. When a girl's just hitting on him and swinging at him, he's like, "Go on, girl, move back," and he's laughing. And society does that same thing. They pick up these camera phones and they start videotaping, and they put it on World Star and TikTok, and everybody's laughing about it. I saw a guy on Facebook Live a few weeks back. He's recording while he's running down the street from his girlfriend, from his baby's mama. And she's chasing him with her shoes off, and she's cussing him out, and she wants to attack him clearly. And he's running, and he's just saying, "Go on, girl, stop it." He's laughing. But two guys happened to be driving down the street, and I guess they saw it on Facebook Live, picked him up and sped off with him and left her in the background running. This is the kind of stuff, you see when it comes to males. They do all these different things, these tests where a guy's hitting on a woman and everybody comes up in arms, and then that same guy gets hit on by her. Everybody's giggling, pointing, pulling out the camera phones. It's a joke, but it's not. So these young men need to know, anytime she puts her hands on you, it's in that relationship, because she don't even know how to talk. It's cliche, keep your hands to yourselves, but these young girls need to learn that too. They need to learn at an early age. This needs to be in the curriculum as far as schools go, as education, just like sex education. They need to put something in here about dating violence and domestic violence, and girls keeping their hands to themselves, men keeping their hands to themselves, helping people get out of these situations, helping people have a better understanding, dealing with these churches, with these schools, all this sort of stuff. It needs to all be put out there. So, I mean, like I say, I just want the ladies out there to know, even the young men, that we don't feel that much different. It's no difference really, except that we men and y'all are women. That's the only difference. We bleed the same. We bruise up. We hurt. We love. We think we in love with that person. You know, we don't want to leave, and we go back several times. They know how to lure us back in. Everything is the same.
Absolutely. And Nicole just brought up a good point too. It's really important, I think, to even back up before, in addition to, it's never okay to hit, but also to talk about, like, it's not normal for people to be going through your phone. You know, it's not normal for people to be questioning for every move and being jealous and accusing you of cheating. You know, those psychological factors too. I think it's so important that we teach young people the difference between love and control and care and jealousy. I didn't know better. And that's why I'm so passionate about teaching young people those differences, because if they really don't know and no one's ever talked to them, they are going to mix it up and think, I can't remember which one of you said something about that actually when you were talking, and it struck me. You said something about that in the beginning. You thought it meant like they cared so much about you, or that it meant, you know, that they felt intensely about you, or it was cute. And I think that's a common misunderstanding, is that line between what's healthy and what's toxic in terms of those behaviors. And all of you had those things happen. All three of you were mentioning that jealousy and controlling and the isolation piece.
Yeah, like, cause I mentioned, like, I gave her all my passwords and all that to, you know, Facebook, MySpace, the emails, my voicemail, my phone and stuff. Cause I felt like if I got nothing to hide, then, you know, there shouldn't be anything wrong. And, like, you know, I just was an open book. That's what I always felt. And yeah, that was, yeah.
And Phil, like, you did all that and it still wasn't good enough.
Right.
Because she was not healthy or in a healthy place, and she still, felt that need to control you, even though you did all of that.
Yeah, I can remember, like, I'm like, you know, she's asking me questions about, like, if a woman emailed me or something, and it could be from work or something, or not even from work, just from a long time ago, and I've never read the email. And she's opening up the emails and reading them. So when I get home, she's asking me, like, you know, who is this? Why are they emailing? It could be someone I haven't heard from in months or years. And I'm like, you read it before I did. Like, I don't even know what it's about. Like, I mean, you can respond to it. I mean, I didn't even care. But it's still, it's like you said, it still wasn't good enough. Like, it was just always my fault. I was always the one that was in the wrong about something.
Mm-hmm. Which is, a very common tactic that we've talked about. Suggestions from you guys, because I know I'm always like looking at the time and I'm always like, how has it been so long that we've been talking? But resources, especially, for all victims, but especially for male victims that you guys are aware of, that you would recommend people check out.
We need to start with our youth. We need to be an example to our youth, men and girls and boys, when they're small. They need to see how we treat other people, how we treat people, so they know how to do it. A lot of these kids in domestic violence relationships, that's all they see, and it's normal for them. We've got to stop that train and get these kids to believe in themselves, and we need to show them how to treat others. We need to do that while they're young. And if you're raising your young man or young lady, show them how you treat your relationships. Be that person that treats everybody well, and that's what they'll get out of it.
That's great advice. Absolutely great advice. Tommy, any specific information or resources that you would recommend for a victim, especially a male victim?
Well, I get reached out to a lot on social media, and I actually started my own group called Pass for Gentlemen. It means purple, always standing tall for gentlemen, domestic violence overcomers. I do have quite a few survivor brothers that are on that group, as well as survivor sisters. So they have all sorts of different nonprofit organizations and some have classes online that you can come in and take, and support groups and things of that sort. If you need any of that information, you can always reach out to me on any of my social media platforms. I'm always networking and making sure that I can get the survivor brothers and sisters connected, whoever needs help, because I remember being in that place and it was nothing for me, and like I said, you just make sure you reach out to me on anything, and I'll make sure I get that information to you.
Awesome. And Tommy, would you, when we're done, would you add that information into the links? And Dave, I know the Riders Against Domestic Violence information too. Do you want to talk about that really quickly?
Yeah, Riders Against Domestic Violence is an organization that refers people to help centers in their area. When they go to that website, all they have to do is put in their zip code, and it populates a list of help centers in their area, which I think is a pretty cool thing. Also, it shares articles from different domestic violence platforms.
Awesome. Would you mind putting that into the comment section too after, so people who might be watching, because a lot of people come back and watch later, and check into the comments, or I can do it too. It's fine. We'll make sure that it's added into the comments for anyone who's interested. Phil, any other suggestions from you?
I mean, you mentioned about I guess how it affects me after the fact in relationships, and I will say me being ignorant about relationships going in and coming out, I didn't, that trust, it's hard to develop. And I actually met someone, and actually she was separated, and I didn't even we didn't even get to meet each other. We just kind of corresponded, fell in love over the phone and stuff. And come to find out she was pregnant, and went back to the guy, but he was an abusive guy as well. But they're separated now, but we're not talking now. But that actually was the first time I actually experienced heartbreak, and then it affected me so much that it took a while to get over that too. And actually my dating life is just non-existent. I dated one person after that, and I actually ended up breaking up with her because it just felt, it wasn't abusive or anything, but it just felt I always got this feeling like she's going to turn against me for whatever reason. It just feels like I'm just going to do something wrong no matter what, no matter how many books I'm reading, no matter what. I'm just and she never intentionally did that. She was never abusive, like I said, but that's in the back of my head now. And it's been 6 years since I've dated anyone, and I'm just I'm my toes on the fence about it. And then on top of that, I feel through the VA and stuff, I found out I've developed a case of ED, and I don't, I don't know if it's mental or only partially it's mental, emotional, and all that other stuff, everything that's been going on, and it's affected me to the point that I feel like I can't even get in a proper relationship. I just feel like I am not the man I used to be, or the man that I could be. I just feel like I'm just out here, I'm just not even a compatible piece to the to the chessboard. I can't fit anywhere. And yeah, it's just, and I also feel like if I was in a relationship and this were to happen again, I'm ignorant to the process of where would I reach out for help if this were to happen to me again. And I know this sounds bad. I feel like I haven't done the homework, or the information isn't out there for me. But if I'm in that situation again, it's like the next time, yeah, I could be locked up or something and falsely accused of something, or something bad, and I just don't know the resources. The resources for me, I feel, aren't readily available to me to actually reach out to, go to the police and say X, Y, and Z, as opposed to just being accused.
Well, and we have two great resources right here with us, But I will also say this, you know, I think it's very common for people who have been through abuse to be very weary in dating. And I am very guilty of looking for red flags and be like, sometimes that aren't even there because I am paranoid about not wanting to be in another abusive relationship. And I've had to do a lot of work, build up that confidence in myself to know that I do have I know now what I'm looking for. And I know those early signs so that I can bounce quickly, but also give people a chance at the same time and not have such a high wall around me, which is kind of what it sounds like with you, Phil, is like there's just a really, really high wall, which is understandable considering what you've experienced. Tammy and Dave, what about you guys in terms of dating and relationships, or do you have any advice for Phil moving forward with?
I just started dating a new person here recently, and like you, I look for the red flags, you know, and what could possibly go wrong. But then again, you know, sometimes in life you've got to take chances. You know, you've got to step out there and just put boundaries out there that you're not willing to have them cross. And I think that's some good advice for you.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think, you know, establishing them and even, you know, putting them in writing and make sure you're not letting anybody cross those boundaries. And if you start to see that crossing of those boundaries, know that something's is not healthy. Tommy, what about you?
Brother, what I can tell you, man, just take your time, man. Get your house in order, you know, get yourself in order. Self-love, you know, relearn yourself. Love yourself first, and then you can apply that love to somebody else. You know, learn to, you know, protect your heart. You know, don't let everybody in there, but at the same time, don't be afraid to love. You know, don't let this situation that you've been in deter you from allowing a good woman to come into your life, because there's some really good ones out here. You know, you just have to find them. But like I say, you know, that whole self-love, self-care, keeping your house in order, you know, that'll get you far, man. You know, just be safe and you know, go out there and just love, man. Love life, you know, and relearn things, man. Refocus.
And Tommy, are you dating at this time or in another new relationship?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Yes, ma'am.
So there is hope.
There definitely is. Like I say, you know, she's very supportive. You know, been around with me since I've been advocating. You know, knows the situation. She actually spreads awareness around up there. You know, she spreads it around at her job. You know, always is very supportive. Watches all my podcasts. You know, she's seen firsthand what I've been through in the courts with my exes. She's seen everything and still stuck by me. She, you know, even through them messaging her and trying to reach out to her and trying to send pictures of my daughter. You know, she's seen how a narcissist can behave, how a manipulator can behave, and she's still stuck by me. So it's somebody out there. It's definitely somebody who are out there who will understand, who will accept it, and who will try to help you and advocate with you.
And don't be surprised, Phil, if you get some DMs after the show.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Yeah.
The DM.
I don't know. So Miriam was just there's so many like I always say like I really need 2 hours on these shows because there's so much to talk about. Miriam just said thank you guys all. You're so courageous, and always a huge thank you, Nicole. Thanks, Miriam. Yeah, it's amazing. Just it's so important to hear like these real life stories and get real life perspectives on these issues. And I know one of the things I had asked you in the beginning if there were things you each wanted me to make sure that we talked about. So I don't want to ignore that. But Tommy, especially for you, it was just family court obstacles specific to males. Do you want to go ahead and just share a little bit about that piece?
Well, just like with domestic violence, you know, once you've gotten out of that situation with a spouse and you've had children with them, that's a whole nother ball game, because the family courts, these judges, these attorneys, that's another level of abuse they're going to submit you to. When you go to court and you're trying to fight for your child, but you're telling them, I was beat by this woman, and they telling you, what did you do? Or they telling you, you play with women's hearts, or you play with your children, or this how much child support you're going to pay, but you can't take your child out of state and you have to pay for a visitation, a paid visitation or something. You know, this is parental alienation type of stuff. Another thing I've started to advocate for, because I have so many friends, male and female, but mostly the males, it's becoming another type of epidemic where they're committing suicide because they're not allowed to see their children. I had a friend that I worked with in Seattle. He was a massage therapist, and he was going through a similar situation as me. And we talked about it. I hadn't talked to him since March. And he killed himself, like I said, in August because he hasn't been able to see his daughters. I know what he was going through, but it hurts me that he went to that point to take his own life because he can't see his kids. Now he's never going to be able to see his kids. And how are they going to explain that to his daughter? You know, how's this mother who is keeping this loving father working hard every day away from his kids? So, like I said, this is a whole nother ball game. You know, you have to watch out for when you have a child with these abusive women or these abusive men. How do you co-parent with them? And how do you get the court system and the police to realize, hey, you know, I'm fearful for my life. This person has been manipulating me for years and they're still doing it. They're still allowed to do it. And in my situation, you know, I don't get any of my stimulus. My stimulus checks were taken. I haven't had an income tax, and I can't tell you how many years. I lost jobs because of this, because I couldn't get a passport to be a flight attendant. I don't get all my full unemployment benefits, and then they take more than half of my paycheck when I am working. So it's like, what? How do you expect me to survive? You know, I get a job, and then you take most of my money, and then when I don't have a job, you're threatening to throw me in jail. You know, you're threatening to take my passport, my driver's license, a fishing license. You know, how do you expect these men and like myself to survive? You know, they feel like there's no way out except for suicide or, you know, whatever way they turn to, alcoholism. You know, it's going to be some kind of other mental abuse that they're dealing with. But you're told to man up, or I would have done this, or you should do this. You know, this is what people are always saying. They're always trying to tell you what they would do in that situation. I would fight. I'd go back to court. But they don't know how these family courts are treating people, you know, and then we don't really have any resources to turn to as men. You know, the court is usually going to rule more in favor of the woman, even if she is a horrible person. It's going to take a lot for a man to even get custody of his children. You know, I always tell people, I wish I had money like Ludacris and Usher and all these other guys who have fought to get their kids, because I could pay a power attorney and I can have my daughters and they can stay out of my life, because otherwise they're able to sneak back into my DMs, into my Facebook Messenger, into my girlfriend's Facebook Messenger, and they're able to send me a picture once a year, maybe on Easter, maybe on Christmas. She looks just like you. She listens to the same music as you. She dances like, I know this because she's my child. You kept her away from me for years. I have a 16-year-old that I've never met, and then I have a 12-year-old I haven't seen since she was 5. So this is things that, you know, I want parental alienation to get out there, because it's child abuse as well. It goes under the same umbrella with domestic violence, suicide prevention, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse. All these are under the same umbrella. So I just want to make sure that young ladies and young men know that too as well, and, you know, keep that at the forefront too.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of times in family court, what it comes down to is who has the most money for the best attorney, or to continue to bring back the victim over and over and over again into family court situations. And we had, gosh, I think it was just last week, or it was on the 15th, we had 2 attorneys on talking about family court issues. And it was really stunning to me, just in general, how many people were mentioning the suicide issue, and how many, you know, victims who are continued to be abused through the court system do end up killing themselves. over it, and it's heartbreaking. And we know what's happening. And again, we also know that the research isn't important in our country right now related to domestic violence victims. And Dave, that was one of the other questions I was going to ask you, because it sounds like you, in terms of the research piece, and that was another show we did, was about traumatic brain injury. Do you sustain a
Yeah.
brain injury related to that very violent incident that occurred with you?
Yes, I still suffer from brain fog to this day. I still walk with a limp. My left leg was broken in 3 places, and it's just unsightly. I don't wear shorts out. I'm just embarrassed to wear shorts. You know, and people ask me, "Why do you limp?" And I just, you know, to this day, I say I'm not limping because I don't want to tell the story.
Yeah.
I'm so embarrassed by it.
Very understandable. And you know, it's how many of these topics overlap each other is amazing. Like so many of these conversations that we've had this month, which I'm so happy we've done. And I think we're going to continue to have them maybe twice a month after October. You know, we've had a ton this month just to really bring awareness to different topics, but the overlap is stunning. In so many of these areas, and also like just the lack of you know, the stigma, but also the lack of justice that we're seeing, you know, occur for victims is stuff that if we keep talking about it, we're eventually going to be able to make a difference. But if, and that's why I kind of started out with like, we're not going to, you know, we're going to continue to raise our voices until there is a difference made, because if we stay quiet about these things, there will never be change. And Dave, when we're working, the Enough Initiative is working on hopefully doing some more, being involved in a research study related to traumatic brain injury and domestic violence. And I would love to engage you in that when we get that fully rolling. So
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'd
Awesome.
also like to say that I am so honored to be sharing this stage with you two gentlemen. Your stories have inspired me.
They're all incredibly inspiring, and thank you so much for being on tonight and being so open and honest and you know, just sharing, because this is the most, I think when people hear your stories, they can relate to it and understand so much more than they ever would just reading an article, right? So this is how we create change, and this is how we end stigma. So thank you so much for being on tonight. I know we're at an hour and 23 minutes. A few more comments are popping up. People, just so you guys know, people have been like commenting throughout, saying how strong you are and thanking you for being on tonight and sharing your stories with them. And you'll be able to go out and read them. And if you guys want to share the live, feel free to do that. It's also going to be available on my YouTube channel. If people want to go to YouTube to watch it too, I've got all of the lives that we've done posted and shared there for the month of October, so that people can go and watch there, and you guys can share it from there too, to, you know, your sites that you work with. And people are just making sure I don't miss any questions that are popping up. I think everyone's just kind of saying thank you right now. If there's anything that I missed, feel free to share it now, or if you want to post in the comments, you guys are welcome to do that too. If not, just thank you so much for being here and giving us your time tonight.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Phil and Dave, and to you, Miss Nicole. It's definitely an honor being on here with you guys. And Phil, I commend you for speaking your truth, you know, telling your story for the first time. I remember when I did it, and it was rough, but it was a good thing, because now that what they told me when I did it, you're an advocate. You're an advocate now, brother. You know, and Dave, I appreciate you, and your story was moving, and the organization that you have, and y'all are some blessed brothers. I'm very blessed to know y'all, and I will definitely keep in touch with y'all. And Miss Nicole, you know you're a queen. I'm very honored that I'm on here with you, and finally glad to be able to speak with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I want to say it was an honor to hear from you, Tommy, and hear from you, Dave. I mean, I've heard some stories in the past, and it's just something to see, like the intensity that how far things can actually go, and then it actually like brings to the forefront like how much change needs to be made in society as far as like training programs and stuff to just like bring up the next generation properly, so people aren't being taken advantage of so freely. And it kind of it's kind of sad that one side or the other is just like getting taken advantage of. But like just like we harped on before, like it's not okay for anybody to put their hands on anybody, whether you're male or female. And and what you talked about too as well about the system as far as like the court system. I mean, it's bad. Like I watched this documentary, Divorce Court, and you mentioned a couple things like the biases of like some of the system, some of the actors or pieces like part of that system. There's a lot of stuff that it's hurting families, and it is child abuse, and it's still abuse. I mean, my ex even told me at one time, like if she would have had kids sooner, then she would have left like sooner. Like that would have been her control piece, like sooner. After that, like I stopped sleeping with her for like a year, like just to like try and get her to leave. Like it's just a weird. I'm a weird person for doing something like that, but it's just like I knew what the next step was, and I just like didn't want to end up in that situation. So like I'm fortunate I didn't have kids with her. Like she has kids by like 2 other dudes, and they're just going through hell being with her. And I'm just like, I'm just glad I missed that bullet. But like there needs to be more stuff, more systems, more programs in place to like educate like people in positions of power and stuff to like actually advocate for kids, so kids can live a happier life with both parents, like, and like the abuse and the bullying can stop, and like people can like there's a way to coexist as parents, like without one parent trying to control the other one. Like there has to be something. So I appreciate both of you guys for sharing and pushing that to the forefront. And Nicole, like always, I mean, you like it's just the first day like I found out what you did, and talking to you, I mean, you've opened my eyes to like a whole world that I was a part of, didn't even know it. And with those definitions, I mean, it's just like opened my world. Through you sharing that with me, I'm able to like share that with other people, and you just like changed the game for me, like like no one ever could. So I appreciate knowing you, and I appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for continuing to share the information and speak up, because, that's the most important thing, and we have to keep doing it. So thank you for doing it. And thank you for letting the Enough Initiative be your first time sharing your story publicly. You did an amazing job.
Mhm.
So I know how hard it is to take that first step. So this was amazing.
Thank you all.
All right, guys, have a great night. I'm going to end the broadcast. And if anyone has questions, we'll keep checking back into the comments, and we will respond when we can. Thank you.
Guys, take care.